Silence the phone.
Hey,
Right.
everybody.
I'm like looking, I gotta silence the phone first before start calling. And so, hello everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show. We're so excited to be with you today. By the way, just for the record here, our show today is sponsored by Noble Gold.
Cool. And now let's hear a word from them.
The US dollar has lost 85% of its value since the 70s, when the dollar decoupled from gold. And the government seems bent on continuing the tradition. From now until after the next elections, the government can print as much money as they want. The last time they did that, inflation went up 9%. Gold is the one asset that has proven to withstand inflation. Invest in gold with Noble Gold Investments. You'll also get a 24-karat, 1/4 ounce gold standard coin for free. Go to geopoliticsgold.com. Now, that is geopoliticsgold.com, or simply dial 1-877-646-5347, the only gold company I trust. Remember, there's always a risk with investments, and there's no guarantees of any kind.
All right.
Well, and a big thank you to Noble Gold, because they've been one of our sponsors for a
they've
long
been with us
time.
for a while.
And guys, I know sponsors, you guys might question why we have them, but they're the reason that we can make this show. So if you guys are interested, check out Noble Gold.
Yeah, and we had the CEO on
We
our
did.
show.
We
It
did.
was nice talking to.
It was nice talking to him.
That was really enjoyed and a lot to learn from this. So, anyway, let's get into our topics. What are we covering today?
All right. So watching these things on the global stage happen is so interesting.
Now you see what geopolitics is
Right,
all about.
right. And exactly what you talk about, that geopolitics doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
These things interplay with each other, and they're complex. So the EU is going to send civilian and military mission to West Africa. Now, we've been watching this unfold with the coup in Niger, and then the Wagner group, and then Prigozhin being killed. And then now we're seeing this civilian military mission in West Africa.
Yeah. So that's one topic. And second one, we're going to be talking about the trip of the Commerce Secretary, U.S. Commerce, Gina Raimondo, to China. I mean, what the heck? We're saying one thing and doing another. Call it straightforward.
Absolutely.
So why is she going there for? So to me, and that's what we're gonna dig into that one. So
well, and she says it's to ease tensions. Which,
the Secretary of State said
see.
the same thing.
Right.
So is the Treasury Secretary. It just talk.
Right.
No more notice.
How eased are those tensions?
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah,
they're not that easy.
They're getting strained as we speak. So
exactly.
And what is our third topic?
So the Niger coup army, the junta,
the revolution. I call it. No, you're free to call it whatever you want. I respect your opinion. I came to conclusion.
Yeah.
After the win a lot of, I do a lot of reading before I get on the air.
Of course.
A lot of people think that all this comes. I read articles. I react to articles.
Yeah.
And I do mention the names of whoever the author of the article is. So this way will be no confusion or misunderstanding. Now, if it is my work, I will say this is my work.
Absolutely.
Just for the record.
Just so you guys know, on Geopolitical Trends, David was targeted by somebody. He made a reaction video to it yesterday, right? So guys, go check out Geopolitical Trends if you want to know everything that happened, because it's worth paying attention to.
Yeah, it's just all of a sudden you're being accused of plagiarism, which is in academia. That's it. But also in academia, this is how you take down someone. Credibility.
Yeah.
I went through the process. I know what plagiarism is.
Right.
And I always used to tell my students, do not just put things in quote or reference the authors or whomever.
Of course.
But for this entity or individual or whatever accuse me of it, that just lame. What do you do?
No, you're absolutely right. That's how people take down other people or try to.
Yeah.
But really, it's just somebody who's upset that you didn't agree with their article.
Exactly.
And so,
in my case, I worked in Washington, so I still have my contacts around the world. And I did find where things are linked to.
Mhm.
Follow the money.
Yep. Always
Follow
follow the
money.
money.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So if
So-
you guys want to know what happened, check out geopolitical trends. Check out David's last video.
And
but
the last topic we're gonna cover also is has to do
So
with
Niger's junta
That's
is
correct.
tried to expel the French ambassador. And in true French colonial style, Macron said,
refused.
no, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if that's what you want. We won't leave.
Yeah, ain't gonna happen. For Africa is change. Africa now
Mhm.
took was it a 360-degree turn,
Yeah.
liberating itself. So that's so this is what we're gonna be covering today and talking in more depth and more. And by the way, we express our reactions to articles. We express
Right.
our reactions to analysis. We put our insights. So this is just for you guys to know. This channel is educational, is informational. We
Mhm.
depend on so many variety of sources. We also add our perspective to it.
Absolutely.
So-
And joint experience. I mean, you know what? Now's a great time actually to talk a little bit about our experience.
yeah,
So, David, you were in the Army, you were Army intelligence. You have authored 4 books. I think it's 6 books, fully authored 4 and then co-authored 2,
so
right?
that's correct. And 145 articles. I usually don't
145
say that.
articles.
And by the way,
Mhm.
my work, everybody can use it.
Yep.
That's the whole reason why I did it, to share knowledge.
Mhm.
Yes, it's my work, but who cares?
Yeah.
Use it if you find it useful.
Yeah.
Simple as
Well,
that.
and you guys have full permission to use clips from this video. If you want to promote it, get it out there, use them.
I had somebody on the other channel, Elizabeth,
Mm-hmm.
asked me, said, Doctor, permission to use all your videos in our TV station.
Yeah.
You know, my answer was, by no means.
Yeah,
please.
absolutely, yes.
Because that's the whole reason why we're here. Because we want to raise awareness.
Yeah.
Share knowledge. What am I to do with the knowledge sitting on it?
No.
Oh, don't
nothing.
use my article or don't use my
Yeah.
analysis. What's the point?
Yeah. What's the point of putting it out there,
Yeah.
actually?
You're doing disservice for humanity.
Mhm.
And I don't believe in that. I believe we are here to do some, whatever that might be, whatever your mission in life.
Mm-hmm.
I found that for me, through this knowledge, I may share it with just whomever has
Yeah.
access to my
Yeah.
stuff. Feel free to use it. So you have my permission to that.
And so a little bit about me, my degree is in global business and
Yeah.
global economics. And I have a specialty in human behavior. So covert hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, over decades of experience in both of those things, because very often business and human behavior go together.
Oh, yeah.
So just to tell you guys a little bit about us here, because we don't do that very often.
Yeah. And a lot of people do not know that you've been in China before.
I have, right? I've been in
Just
China, I've been
FYI.
in India, I've
Yeah.
been in many, many other countries. So have you.
Well, so let's start with this one here.
Mhm.
If the article, guys, that came out of the EU, it stated the EU to send, pay attention to this, and I put in quote here because it's not my word, it's theirs. EU to send civilian military mission in West Africa.
Mhm.
What's wrong with that title, guys? What do you think?
Right.
Can you just put the answer there? But here is where the knowledge for Elizabeth comes in. Because if you read that sentence carefully, the EU to send civilian military mission in West Africa.
Mhm.
Can you unpack this for
Well,
us?
all right. So we're looking at civilian military, right? So if they just said military, we're sending a military operation into Africa.
Yeah.
That means a very different thing than civilian military. One of the big things that's been happening is the civilian population has been uprising all over Africa over the last decade or
Yeah.
so.
Uh-huh.
And so what we just saw in Niger was the people was a civilian uprising. And so we're looking at not the heavy-handed language of we have a military
Military.
operation and we're going to do this. We're
Yeah.
going to obliterate you guys. It's a civilian military
So
operation
to soften.
to soften the blow and also to say we have the support of the population to do this, right?
Which they don't.
But if they say they have the civilian operation, civilian military operation,
Yeah.
that means they're using their own people to go do this also, and that they have that support
Yeah.
from the civilian population. Interesting, right?
Well, yeah. But also, what's very even more interesting is the idea of that the European Union that plans to do this. They only said it will include police, it will include military personnel, and guess where this came from? From a German source.
German source, yeah.
Yeah, and the idea that without, this is what I found, without specifying. So how can you embark on an intervention, on a mission, on a venture, whatever term you want to use, without providing the detail? That's like what we do here. Can we just sit here and talk about whatever? Right. If we don't give our viewers, here is what we're going to be talking about in this episode.
Right. And it's interesting exactly what you just brought up, David. So it came out of a German newspaper, Die Welt am Sonntag. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, but very often it's interesting. We get these little tidbits. I actually remember another thing that we got from a German newspaper that was geopolitically related. I think it was about a year ago, but it's interesting how these little things kind of get leaked, right? They get leaked into, because nowhere else is reporting it. Everywhere that's talking about it is talking about this newspaper article for it.
Well, yeah, because there is also an objective into leaking information. Sometimes, you know, we used to see it in Washington. I was there. We will, by design, you leak tidbits of information.
Yeah.
So there are media outlets there that works in conjunction with certain entities inside the government. They'll take the story and run with it. But the objective wasn't about. The objective is to just leak that information. So now you have people span up as to what does it mean.
Well, and interestingly enough, so if we look at what they said, so this is what they said was the reason in this newspaper article. So the reason behind their planned mission, right, was so we can't say the names of these groups because YouTube doesn't like it and will demonetize us and all of that. So we'll let your imagination go as to what the names of these groups are. They're ones that you would recognize from the news a lot. That this extremist group could extend their activities in West Africa from the Sahel zone. Where have we heard that region recently? Towards the southern coastal countries on the Gulf of Guinea, leading to even more widespread instability in the region. And so that's from Welt am Sonntag. Now, where have we heard about this zone recently? From what's been going on with Niger, right?
Niger, that's correct. Yeah, I was thinking because when you mentioned that, it brought to my mind some ideas about this leak thing. Why? Just to go back to that one, to highlight to you guys, there's a story going on right now that you wonder why people don't hear much about. And this has to do with the deal that China refused now. They canceled some orders from Germany. So, and one time I had somebody said to me, you know, I live in Germany and I couldn't find this information.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't take a genius to figure out
why. Does not.
Why? Because there was a major deal that, let me share with you guys the link here so you can take a look at it yourself. And
in the chat.
I'm going to post it for them.
Okay.
It's because I did the video on it on the other channel.
Perfect.
So once, you know, you'll, and I put about 11 links to it. It's all matter of where you find the information. This is what people do not. I want you guys to know, because we care about how you consume the knowledge. We want you to really learn and know how to read between the lines.
Right.
This is why I've been targeted from an academia per se, because I know how to read between the lines. And when you challenge somebody who is he or she or they or the entity, whatever, putting information out there to really manipulate.
Right.
That's like
to redirect. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the whole point of it. So
well, and guys, pay attention to that. You know, the people, I found it interesting over my lifetime watching who gets targeted and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And who gets targeted by who and who doesn't. So some of the people that are, you know, like we have cancel culture. Cancel culture is horrible right now.
Yeah.
And if somebody is about to be canceled and you look at the reason and you're like, is this is this for real?
Real. Yeah.
Look at what that person is saying,
Same.
because they're likely saying something that the powers that be don't
Yeah.
want you to hear or don't want you to listen to.
Well, this is most likely what we're going to be talking about tomorrow in
On Rumble. Yeah.
because we're going to be exposing some stuff. So let's go back to our topic here
Okay.
quickly here, because I need to highlight one thing. Now, what the EU is saying,
Mm,
you know, let
Yeah.
me put the map for you guys, because, and I'm going to leave it there for a few seconds while I elaborate on certain aspects of it. And the reason why I wanted to let that on for you to see, this is what I'm pointing out.
mm,
This is the whole region. And what the EU is saying right now is saying that they fear extremist groups.
Right.
You know,
In this region
yeah.
that happens to include Niger.
Yeah. And this is where, but my point also is not
Mhm.
about that. My point is also about how now the West is reverting back
Yeah.
to extremism.
Right.
So
Right.
what is the truth about all this?
Yeah.
Which they are not discussed. As a matter of fact, I read the analysis of a professor of international relations at the University of Geneva. His name is
Mhm.
Hosni Abidi. He was spot on certain aspects. I
Yeah.
still have to, I will use the term disagree respectfully, of course, but he was spot on certain aspects of it from his analysis perspective. Where I disagree with him on
Mhm.
is that he either forgot or whatever. I'm not pointing fingers here, just to highlight
Mhm.
that the presence of NATO has not been mentioned into all this. So you
Mm.
take the EU and you take the NATO's mission and planning.
Mhm.
So why the EU is saying, oh, because we want to prevent extremism, but not saying, oh, because NATO is
Right.
expanding. Well,
Right.
if you look at the map, here, guys,
Mhm.
NATO is already conducting training in this part of the world, in this part of the Sahel. This one here, I don't know if,
No,
they don't see the
they don't see
cursor.
the they don't see
Sorry,
the
I
cursor.
thought you guys
It's
see the
okay.
cursor where I'm pointing out. In Mauritania,
Okay.
Mauritania is all the way on near the
Yeah.
Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
That's where now the expanding
Mhm.
security collaboration under the umbrella of fighting extremism.
Right.
Now you take what's going on in Niger,
Right.
and you can just see how the overlapping.
Right.
So for any average person, this is so complicated. You
It's
have
so
to break
complicated.
it down.
Yeah.
And this is where I see the arguments of the EU. I mean, I respected the Professor Abidi from
Yeah.
the University of Geneva. He was spot on as
Yeah.
to what the European Union is. But the European Union also refrained
Mhm.
by design intentionally
Yeah.
from mentioning that because of NATO's presence.
Absolutely. Well, because I think if people knew that that's what was happening,
Yeah.
because right now we're seeing the expansion of NATO, right? We're
Yeah.
seeing it into Southeast Asia. We're
Mhm.
seeing the expansion of NATO through we watched the expansion of NATO over the last few decades 3 times in Europe
That's
when
correct.
they said absolutely that would not happen. And now we're seeing it expand sort of all over the world. And the question is why?
That is correct.
That's not the purpose that it was
Yeah.
meant for.
And
So why?
You're right. That's a legitimate question to ask. And you know how I always say,
Mm-hmm.
nothing happens in a vacuum
Absolutely.
in geopolitics,
Yeah.
right? All this, what we're talking about, happens against the backdrop
Mm-hmm.
of the current
Right.
U.S. official. His name is Molly Fay. He's the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State
Mhm.
for African Affairs, who is right now in Western African nations.
Mhm.
So EU statements didn't happen just out of thin air.
Right.
It was the coordination there.
Right.
That tells you right there. Because the concern about losing
Right.
access to, they don't care for democracy. They are concerned about losing access to
Resources.
Exactly.
And so we're talking about resources, right? So one of the things that was mentioned at the beginning of the coup situation that hasn't really been talked about much since is the pipeline. So one of the things
Yes.
that's happening here is that all of this oil that was supposed, or natural gas oil that was supposed to be going
Mhm.
to Europe,
Europe.
the EU right now, is being cut off. So we had the Nord Stream pipeline incident, whatever you sabotage, it's very clearly sabotage, right?
Of course.
So we had that sabotaged. There was a plan to send it from the United States. That also got nixed. And now we have this pipeline that was supposed to go through Niger, Nigeria, and Libya.
Algeria.
Supposed
To go through Algeria.
And now that's nixed too because of what's going on in Niger. So what's happening is that EU is being cut off. From gas.
It's their own failed policies.
Absolutely.
They followed blindly, not knowing what they're getting themselves into.
And
straightforward.
This particularly to me is interesting because there's a situation overall in Africa where they seem to be pushing back on colonialism and on the colonialist countries. And the colonialist countries, they're talking about tides of instability and they don't want instability. And, they were a little bit later, we'll talk about the claims from France that they're doing this enormous amount of good to Africa. The issue with that is that out of one side of their mouth, they're talking about all the good that they're doing for the African people in the various countries that they're very heavily in. And on the other side, poverty in Africa, to me, I've grown up with poverty in Africa. There's never been a time where, for any reason, I thought these African nations that we were talking about were doing well. So for all of the decades that those countries have been in those countries in Africa, they're not doing well still. So I don't understand the claims that are being made that all of these African countries are, especially West African countries, are doing so well because of the colonialist countries. It seems like it's out of both sides of their mouth. Because growing up, what we heard was there's starving kids in Africa. So you have to finish what's on your plate because there's starving kids in Africa. There's no point where I sat there and said, oh, well, the African nations are doing well. And you bring this up all the time, David, that the biggest resource is gold, right? Which country is it that is the biggest resource is gold?
Uganda.
And that most of it is sent to France.
Yeah. So I think there's some also, I believe, in Niger.
Yeah.
Itself.
I think it's
Mali
in Niger too.
Or
Yeah.
Burkina Faso, one of them, but
Yeah.
Africa has a lot of resources onto that. So the whole idea of all this is the EU now losing. They realize that that's it. Africa now is pushing back and almost saying we've had it.
Right.
I mean, it used to be, and it's not. It used to be still. Her name is Dr. Arikana Chihombori. Let me share an image with you guys. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to reach out to her to invite her.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
She lives here in the U.S., in Tennessee. Let me share with you guys an image of her. And she's been saying this all along. But yet the European, the Western world ignored her calls for this. This is her image right now. Yeah. So the very, 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 very savvy lady. She even served on a capacity of ambassador. So I intend to reach out to her. And
that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. I would actually love her perspective on this situation, because it is, it's interesting that we're starting to get this narrative right now that the groups, I'm just going to call them groups, that the United States is concerned about. We've known that the United States had a drone base in Niger. That was one of the first things that came out when the story broke, right? We've known that. And that's not something that I think they're willing to give up. And this base is for group activities, type of group that we can't really talk about.
Correct. Yeah.
Group activities. And so right now we're watching, it's interesting that they're very concerned about this region specifically and instability.
Yeah.
When Victoria Nuland went and couldn't see the former president Bazoum. They couldn't. She couldn't see him.
Well, because she couldn't dictate the terms. They were like to her, like, "Who the heck are you to come and dictate?" Visiting. There's also something in a diplomatic protocol. You don't break protocol, but when you start dictating to host, as a matter of fact, there are now a conversation from some observers that, they get into the point of saying, well, wait a minute, why is the Western world all of a sudden getting so involved in this when it is an
Right.
internal matter?
Right.
This
That's
is like
a great
almost,
question.
yeah, because to me, I look at the events around the world,
Mhm.
and I look at the issue of Taiwan as an example.
Yeah.
Well, the issue of Taiwan is an internal matter for China.
Right.
So I know there are a lot of people will say, well, no, Taiwan is independent. It's like, yeah, but Taiwan is not a sovereign state. They just state the fact as they are. So this is the same arguments for the case of Niger. They are now the revolution. And by the way, guys, Dr. Anika called it revolution. There's now a sort of the terminology is changing. They don't look at this as a coup. They look at it as revolution.
Yeah.
And I can see the logic into that. And myself, I used the term coup at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I refrained from using it anymore.
That's
Why?
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I had to dig enough to find out if it is the right term.
Yeah. And because why did they do it, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, because if things were going so well, they wouldn't have done it.
But not only that, is also why the term will be more appropriate for that is because if you have the support of the population, something like that will consider revolution, a revolution, not a coup. A coup is when you conduct it to overthrow the government, but also against the will of the people.
Right. Well,
this is where the difference.
You know what, and that's in very important linguistics. So you were talking about that earlier, the linguistics of why using certain words versus other words. And you're absolutely right. Coup has the sense that the people were not involved in it, but that does not seem to be the case. Objectively, that doesn't seem to be the case. And they're talking about how great things were under President Bazoum, but if that were true, that's literally what they're saying, is that things were not great. And that's why they, took over the government, whether it was a revolution or a coup. That's why they did it. And people don't tend to revolt when things are going well.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
That is true.
And you can tell that the colonial powers did not want this to happen because of how actively they're going against it and trying to put President Bazoum back in. So if it's going against the will of the people that hard, who did it?
Yeah.
Right. And it's, it's possible because they asked the Wagner group for help. It's very possible that Russia had some involvement or China had some involvement. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know that for a fact, but I do know that that's who they went to. They turned to Wagner. And then mysteriously, Prigozhin dies not very long after that.
But also because this saw the results in Mali, that it was with the assistance of the Wagner that they were able to kick the French out.
Well, and also in Ukraine, Wagner has made most of.
They are. As a matter of fact, they just signed now. The President Putin asked them, all of them, no exception, to sign the allegiance to Russia.
Well,
about time.
I understand.
Well, it's
I understand why that happened. This whole thing has gone down kind of like a movie.
There's a lot of stuff to unpack on that for another day.
Yes,
because it's so. All right. Well, let's move on. So just to wrap this up before we move to the next topic, the idea of now the EU calling for all this, it's nothing but I almost feel comfortable using the term, we're gonna go against extremism and so forth. It's nothing but a diversion. Right. When in reality, NATO's presence is expanding slowly, starting from Mauritania, going on, because that region, the whole Sahel region, is the richest in the part of Africa. There are other countries that have other resources as well.
Absolutely.
But that's where the concentration
this is a very interesting piece of exactly what you just said, David. It's interesting looking through the research. Every so often you'd hear one tiny little line that said, well, and the EU also wants to counter Russian influence because of Wagner, right? So it's like, well, this is, it's these groups, but also the EU wants to counter the Russians because of Wagner
to justify.
And it's like, that's like the tiniest little lie. It's like one little line about that. And it's like, you guys, you're not even hiding it very well.
Well, this is the reason why we have the channel here, is to decipher all that noise and all that, and provide our viewers, or our listeners, that is, or subscribers, with a clear
Yeah.
understanding of where things are.
Yeah.
And this is usually where, some institutions, they
Mhm.
will be very concerned, because their thinking will be, there are people out there
Yeah.
who can read through the
Yeah.
noise, and they don't like that. So what they end up doing
Mhm.
is trying to undermine them by,
Yep.
character defamation.
Wah,
So, you know
wah.
how it is.
Yeah,
You know
I
how it is.
do, and you're not the first, and you won't be the last. But you guys are the people who do read between the lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
All
right.
right, let's move on to our next topic. It has to do with the U.S. Secretary of
Secretary,
Commerce.
Commerce
I
Secretary.
always think in terms of foreign policy.
I know,
And right
I
there,
know.
Secretary of State comes to mind.
Well,
but-
so this is the third secretary that has been to China in the recent months
Exactly.
to try to ease tensions. So apparently Janet Yellen wasn't enough.
Tony Blinken.
Blinken, thank you. I was going to say Jerome Powell, but I was like, that's not the right person.
No.
Blinken and now Raimondo have gone to ease these tensions.
And don't forget to add another one.
Who?
CIA director.
CIA director. That's absolutely right.
But those are from a different channel per se, as we say, because that's the norm.
But we've used economic warfare more
Exactly.
or less on China.
Yeah.
And so they've retaliated in some ways. And turns out neither economy is doing well with those choices.
Yes. And this is the reason why, for example, when you mentioned earlier about the leaks,
Yeah,
that's the purpose of it. This is why I hesitated to talk about that deal that China cut with Germany, because I wasn't certain myself, and I had to dig into all of it. That's why I put all those links and I posted for you guys. It's because that shocked both Germany and the EU car manufacturers.
Yeah.
And you know why? And I put the stats, the numbers, the sources, all that stuff. It's because they realized, the European Union or Western countries for that matter, they realized that cutting off China from that ended up backfiring big time.
It's a bad idea. It's a huge economy. It is the emerging economy. It's a bad idea.
So, and this is why she's going. Will she achieve anything?
Okay, so here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
So we have two sides. So this is an interesting phenomena that I actually learned about a couple of decades ago.
I'll share her picture.
Oh, thank you.
Going,
So this is something I learned about a while ago. So one of the biggest and best tactics that a government has is to promote war, but then also have a faction inside of the population that wants peace. So you can go make war, but still look like you want peace. Right. So it's the public perception is that, oh no, the citizens really want peace. But the government just has to go to war. They just have to do this. And so it gives the perception that they're not warmongers, that they are in fact, desiring peace, but they just have to go do this.
Yeah.
So I see a similar situation happening here because and this is just my analysis, right? Because Biden has made some very, very strong statements, some very strong policies that they say are not anti-China, but they're anti-China without saying that they are. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I'm not going to say. There are a lot of people here in the United States that have very negative sentiments towards China. I think mostly because we have things like this that are saying the reason that the United States is failing is because of China. That is objectively not true. There are things about China that I do not appreciate. You know this. I get a lot of. I think I can say shit, right? I get a lot of shit from some of you guys about my stance on China, which is fairly neutral. But we have a lot of people here that are being led to believe that China is the reason for all of our economic problems. That is not true. Money printing was a huge reason for a lot of our economic problems. Taking our currency off the gold standard was a huge reason. Lobbyists are a huge reason. So the budget inflating is a huge reason. So it's not China bad. China caused all our problems. That is not true. But the government needs someone to blame that isn't them.
Well, that's why you have, for example, now the presidential candidates
Yeah.
Especially that's what they aiming at. Oh, we gotta fight China because
I
we
know.
can't let. So it's
I was
ridiculous.
like, what an ignorant
Well, that's how
point of view.
That's how they respond to their donors.
I know,
Remember,
I know.
if they don't say that, the money will dry up.
Well, and I think right now the people in the United States have been fed this narrative for so long that that's also part of the deal. And so, you know, there are I think there were Republicans who
Yeah.
told who sent a letter to Raimondo, and I'm not either Republican or Democrat. I think there's good on both sides and bad on both sides.
Yeah.
But they said, don't go do this, don't go ease tensions with China. And I thought about that for a second, and I said, they must not really understand what's at stake. They must not really understand the reality of where we are in that relationship
Yeah.
with China. We cannot just decouple,
No, they
which
can't.
is the words that have been thrown around, right? We economically cannot. And the United States is in such bad shape economically right now anyway. And China's economy is also slowed.
Yeah. Actually, the French Minister of Commerce, I think I
Yeah.
remember, if I recall, I read something. I wish I would have kept the, you know, I like to keep the records.
Oh
for
yeah,
something.
yeah, of course.
Anyway, I read that.
Sometimes they get scrubbed from the internet, so it's
Yeah.
good to keep them.
So he said decoupling from China is nonsense. He's realizing, and
Yeah.
France, believe it or not, behind closed doors, they are trying to keep the doors open.
Yeah.
Even Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany
Mhm.
himself, his relationship with China is different
Yeah.
than other members of his cabinet, including the Minister of Economy
Yeah.
and the Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock.
Yeah.
You know, which, by the way, she's calling that China is a security threat to me. I was like, wow.
Well, that isn't necessarily wrong, but so is everyone else, right? Everyone is spying on everyone.
Yeah, but at the
Everyone
same
has
time, for her
backdoors
to use
everyone.
the terminology like that,
It's that same narrative. It's the
that's to
same
me,
narrative.
yeah.
China bad and is the reason. China and Russia bad, and they're the reason for all of the problems here.
Yeah.
But if you look at that, if you agree with that, and you say, "Oh, they're the reason
Yeah.
for all the problems here," who let Chinese investment into the United States?
Yeah.
The U.S. government did that.
Yeah.
It was if it were the situation where China or foreign entities were not allowed to purchase land in the United States.
Yeah, but at the same time, how can you block that when we have what's so-called capitalism?
Right.
So you have
Well,
money, you buy it.
Other
So
countries
Chinese
have
happen to have money.
Right,
Simple as is that.
And they have. And
Yeah.
that's what the US wanted. The US wanted that foreign investment. Well, the problem is if you ask for foreign investment, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
And so now the politicians, decades too late, are saying, oh, well, we need to block it now.
No, it's
Do
too
you
late for that.
understand? Do you understand how long that
Yeah.
investment's been here?
Well, the whole idea of like ties to the foreign policy of, or the issue within foreign policy of containment.
Right.
And this is why I've always believed, way back when I even started my master's degree studies,
Mhm.
back then, I used to hear the term about containment, like where things are going. Given
Yeah.
that I've been watching since 1991,
Right.
I've been watching how the trend, and that's when I was hoping to go learn Chinese, because I knew where that thing's going to be in the next 20, 25 years. So,
Well,
so the idea of the containment thing, it's not going to
it
work.
doesn't make sense.
It's too late for it now.
Yeah.
So where the problem with all this that I see, this is why you have statements always from, if you noticed, and we can look at the records, they
Mhm.
all say, well, we look forward to constructive discussion.
Right.
That's always the key terms that they use. Well, how can you look for constructive discussions when you are going on the other side, on the other end,
Yeah.
and creating issues or whatever you want to
Well, the answer to that is
Yeah.
that I think that they realized, like, the real people who are running our economy, okay, not the president, because the president does not have the control that the American people think that he does, or the world thinks that he does, quite frankly. So he doesn't have all that control.
Yeah.
So the people who are really running things are, and the corporations here are making less money. They're not happy about a lot of the things that
That's
Biden
going
has
on. Yeah.
has put in place, right? And interestingly, if you look at people like Tim Cook and if you look at people like Elon Musk, they have been very clear that they are not enemies with China because they make a lot of money there and they want to expand their market share in China. So it's interesting to me, and what I think is happening here is that the reality is that the face that Biden is putting on. So, they just had this Japanese, South Korean and
Alliance.
At Camp David, right? So they had this summit between Biden and then the leaders of Japan and South Korea in Camp David, and they swear it wasn't anti-China. But if you look at what came out of that, it was, not positive.
And if
towards China.
You add two things to this, which I intend. By the way, the reason why I get this allegations and all that, it has to do with one of those countries in the region.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it has to do with Indonesia.
Ah.
So just to add to what you said, there are two other elements you need to add. Philippines just flipped.
Yeah.
We just flipped Philippines now. So Philippines is going with the US against China. Philippines, because remember, during Duterte, Duterte moved towards China.
Yeah.
Marcos Bongbong,
that's
his nickname. After his visit to the US, now he's being flipped. And I bet you this, during the visit, some arrangement has been made.
Oh, I'm sure.
And you know what it's about? His family assets, because they were frozen in the US. So it just flipped.
Yeah.
I just did a video on it. On
well, and honestly, how can you trust anybody whose assets are frozen in the United States who's a leader? Like, how can you trust that?
That's true. Then you add that the second question is not the question, but rather the second issue is Indonesia. Now, the analysis that's coming up from certain entities suggesting that, Indonesia could be pulled into a conflict between China and the US. Well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's misleading.
I hope not.
That is misleading. This is where academia can really manipulate the wording of it.
Yeah.
Why they are pushing this narrative, especially if you find out who's funding where those analyses coming from.
Yeah.
This is what I want you guys to learn. Anytime you read something, pay close attention to how it's worded.
Yeah.
Because here is the thing. Indonesia, its economy is considered one of the top performers in ASEAN.
Yeah.
That's one.
Absolutely.
Second, it has a good relations with China because of economics.
Yeah.
And third, Australia is concerned about Indonesia because that's a competition.
Yeah.
So this is why we want and established two things. One with Papua New Guinea, entered into a military agreement. And second one on two countries, Philippines and India. On Philippines, we expanded more bases. And with India, we're going to establish a naval hub.
Yeah.
This is what it's all about.
Yeah.
So this is why you can't be thinking, it's only this issue or that issue. No.
You're absolutely right.
No. There are a host of moving parts.
Yeah.
And an average Joe, average Jane, there is no way.
They don't. And they just hear China, Russia, bad.
Exactly. But also this highlights to you one of the key aspects when it comes down to changes within the global stage.
Yeah.
When a sitting power is in decline, it tends to embark on a very, very incohesive policies.
Yeah.
That's what we are seeing now.
Yeah.
And what am I referring to here? I am referring to the United States, of course, but in response to what? In response to the latest summit of BRICS.
Yep.
Because it's expanding.
Yep.
Now you are seeing we're going to be embarking on more ill-conceived policies like what we're seeing right now.
Well, and it's so interesting because, we get called anti-American all the time. And it is not about that.
Yeah.
I love being here. I love the United States.
It's our country.
It's our country. And it's so full of beautiful people and places. The reality is that we're now seeing on a global stage, the rest of the world saying, hey, all that stuff that you were doing for decades, we, number one, don't appreciate it. And number two, we're going to try and take you guys out. And so militarily they can't do it, but economically
They will
they
be able
will.
to.
They'll be able to.
And that's why the reason why we're doing the course.
Yeah. Government course.
Yeah.
It will be up for sale after this live stream.
Yeah.
So check it
really?
out. Yes,
Okay.
later today, guys, in the description. If you're watching
Yeah,
this
take a
later,
look.
it will be in the link will be in the description box. And we're if you guys see it on this show, we're gonna give you 20% off. So I'll put a code in there too for 20%
Yeah,
off.
why
to do it.
not? Do it
Yeah,
for
if-
our
if you guys are watching this-
supporters and viewers. Hey, that's some of our subscribers been with us since we started. I
Absolutely.
still remember names.
Yeah, I
I
do too.
remember
I do
names,
too.
you
We
know.
haven't seen Boone in a while. I'd love to see Boone. Boone, if you're out there.
He's busy. He's busy probably because he did put something on a Discord
Oh,
and I
cool.
responded to it. You know,
Yeah.
he's busy. So
But
yeah,
yes.
the course, guys. We're gonna. That's it.
Yeah, we'll
It's-
launch it. Well,
yeah.
it's launching today, so guys, check it out in the
Yeah,
description
when you
box
go.
below.
And I will be detailing a lot of stuff about all this because
Yeah.
it's important for people.
Well, and
to
it's
know.
important because, if we're going to save ourselves here in the United States, the first part of any big issue is being honest about what the issue is.
Yeah.
And so if we're hiding what the issue is behind, watching the debates was almost embarrassingly bad. When
I didn't
people
watch. I don't
people
watch.
talk about our interactions with China, with Russia, the Ukraine situation, all they have is this really surface level understanding. They just have, well, Russia did this and then China is bad for these reasons. And without any real understanding of how complex these issues are.
Yeah.
They're really complex. And to just boil them down to these are the reasons you have all these problems in life, it takes away from what the real problems are and it doesn't let us solve them. And if we don't solve them in our lifetimes, we're going to watch the US dollar not become the reserve currency anymore.
Yeah.
And we're going to watch the US decline and lose its hegemony. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe a multipolar shift is a good thing, but I can tell you watching the US decline is not great. It is pretty terrible to watch the US decline like this.
Yeah.
And nobody is talking about how complex the issues are that got us here, or the fact that cooperation is going to be the thing that gets us out of it.
That's true.
Instead of looking at everybody as an enemy, which the military industrial complex has to do to justify wars all the time. Instead of looking at everyone as an enemy, why can't we look at them as other human beings who are living on this planet, who want the same things that we do?
Yeah, because that doesn't bring money.
I know, but it's the way
reality.
that we will survive.
I know. So let's wrap up this before we move to the next topic. So the idea of the Commerce Secretary going to China to discuss ways of
boosting commerce.
Forget about it. They're gonna be just talks. And Chinese are smart enough to know they will sit down, give the protocol, because that's a protocol. You can't break it. And Chinese are good at that. They will do the protocol and all that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they're gonna consume whatever we're gonna say. So.
Well, to its credit, I actually hope that this works on some level because both the U.S. and the Chinese economy are being hit by this.
We are more than the Chinese are.
Yeah. I mean, that's true.
I looked. The Chinese also, yes, they do have some slowdown in sorts of the economy and all that. And even for the high unemployment, whatever that was. But that was for a segment of society that is
the young segment. It's
very, very young.
segment.
Because when you look at that, even for us here in the U.S., that age brackets, between 14, I think, and
I think it was 16 and 25 or something like that. Yeah.
Still not in the full force of the unemployment, employments and all that stuff. So, but Europeans are feeling the pinch of it. American companies are feeling the pinch of it. And now with the outcome of the BRICS expanding into adding 6 more countries, that's the reason why she's there to find out. So
well. For what it's worth, I actually hope that there is some resolution they come to.
Let's hope.
Okay, our last topic. So Niger's junta is tried to expel the French ambassador, and Macron said, no. French ambassador is going to stay there.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. Well, the deadline has passed. As a matter of fact, he was supposed to leave Niamey, which is the capital of Niger, on Sunday. And by the way, I looked at, because I read different languages.
Mhm.
They misspelled the name of the ambassador. They put his name as Sullivan, and his name is not Sullivan. His
It's
name is
Sylvain.
Sylvain, or Sylvain Eat.
Yeah,
Sylvain Eat.
Sylvain.
Well, in some, I saw some translated articles. They
okay,
put
okay,
as
okay.
Sullivan and so forth. But anyway,
Sullivan?
the idea, yeah.
Is
It
that
just
the American translation of
yeah,
Sylvain?
that's how Sylvain, his name is Sylvain.
Huh.
Yeah. So anyway, what happens now is for the revolution leaders,
Yeah.
they want him out. It's because they want to sort of, I think the reason why they want that,
Mhm.
that's a complete loud and clear message to France that you're done here.
Yeah.
You're out of here completely.
Yep.
And the response from France was no, because remember, you still have about 1,500 troops,
Mhm.
French troops
Yeah.
and they're still there.
Yeah.
We have our presence there, but for us it's different.
Yeah.
This is why, if you noticed, the leaders of the revolution
Yeah.
didn't criticize the US.
Yeah. That is very interesting.
Yeah, but also it's a strategy for us
Mhm.
because we threw French under the bus.
Mm.
We let them
Yeah.
take the fall. Same thing we did with them in Australia with the AUKUS. Remember?
Yeah.
We stabbed them in the back.
Oh, that's right. With the submarines?
We did
Yeah.
that. It's the same thing we're doing
Yeah.
with them because for us, Niger is strategic location, not
Yeah.
only for its resources, but also the location itself.
Right. Well, the oil pipeline too.
That's
I mean,
one,
nobody's talking about that, but
No,
that's
they
still a big deal.
Which was the same thing that happened back in the 80s in Afghanistan. What the
Yeah.
whole thing about
Yeah.
was about a pipeline.
Yeah.
That's all it was. So that pipeline was supposed to come through Southeast through Southeast Asia and all the way across through Iran and so forth. But in Niger is the same case, and this is why the revolution leaders, decided not to criticize the US, but focus on they focus on France because France is the one that is using all the resources more so. We do get some of the uranium from Niger, but not as much as we get from other places.
Well, it's interesting. Speaking of uranium for a second, as in the research, I found that the United States is actually doubling the amount of uranium it's bringing in from Russia.
Whoa!
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
We might do a show on that because that's an interesting topic on its own.
And they won't disclose that.
Yeah, they won't, and this is a very interesting situation because the French ambassador wasn't showing up to meetings apparently. And so that's what they're using as a like, hey, he's not showing up to meetings. We're not, he's not showing up to his scheduled meetings, so he's out. And it's interesting that Macron said no, because if he brings the ambassador back home, if he brings him out, then what influence does France still have in Niger?
None,
right?
Because you don't have any diplomatic representation.
Right.
And what's interesting about Macron's statement, his statement was to other ambassadors.
Yeah.
It was yesterday, by the way.
Yeah.
His statement was yesterday in Paris. So to other ambassadors, but because he realizes that the heat France is getting, and the thing is, he was counting.
Yeah.
Macron was counting on the US.
Yeah.
The US kind of let him take the fall.
Yeah.
It's politics. It's interest.
Well, and France is not doing a dissimilar thing. France has also called for de-dollarization. So, we're tit for tatting at this point, right? Because
true.
It's true. France at a certain point was talking about joining BRICS and wanted to de-dollarize and all of that. So I definitely don't see France getting the support of the United States at this point, because they also are doing both sides. They also are playing both sides.
Yeah. And it's about time for Africans to really benefit from their own resources.
Of course.
Massive amount of resources.
Yeah.
And yet they are not. I mean, it's
their natural resources, their own civilian population, their own manpower. It is absolutely time for them to start benefiting from their own hard work and natural resources. So,
and I think this is why the idea of for Macron to say, well, no, I'm not leaving, because it will also send the message that the era of French colonialism in Africa
Yeah.
is over permanently.
Well, I mean,
And it is,
that
Paul,
isn't it?
it is. You're talking
It's
about,
getting
there
there.
is no going back now.
Yeah.
The one thing I am certain about,
Right.
there is no going back.
Right.
That's it. Africa's moving forward now.
Well, and
No, the question becomes is how they're going to move about. They have to have a strategy in place.
right.
So with all those resources, if they don't use that strategically
Yeah.
and smartly,
Yeah.
they will lose the opportunity. I
Well,
don't see them doing that. But how long have we heard about where Africa is?
I mean, honestly, and that's what I was bringing up earlier is, there's there's a part of this that I found. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah.
Where they were getting money, they were getting foreign aid. And the reality is that if your country needs foreign aid, what it really actually needs is a stable government that looks out for the people and can build its own infrastructure and investment, right?
Yeah.
Keeping a country in the state that it needs foreign aid for as long as France has,
Yeah.
to me is, I think, unacceptable.
Yeah, let alone the resources, like we said last time, for France to declare itself the fourth gold
Yeah.
reserves in the world. How the heck did you get all that when you don't have a single
Right.
gold mine in your country?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of no-brainer to
No, it's
say,
true.
the fourth. You're looking at a 4,000. I'm still remembering
Yeah.
because I drilled it into my brain because I was like, where did they get 4,062
Yeah.
tons of gold? Where did they
Mhm.
get that from?
Well, they got it from, a lot of it came from Africa. A lot of it
So-
came from countries
yeah,
like
but
Niger.
in return for that, what those countries got in return?
No, that's a great
I
question.
looked
What
at
did
it-
What did
yeah.
they get?
I looked at it for the uranium.
Mhm.
They're selling it at about $238 a pound.
Yeah,
You know how much those workers in Niger made?
$1 less. I don't know.
So I think with this, and France, I think by taking this stand, and this is just me
Mhm.
thinking outside the box,
Yeah,
by taking this stand, is wooing more Europeans into,
Right.
hey, you need to get in here because
right.
access to street. Remember, and by the way, we're not just pointing fingers at France by itself.
Right.
Don't forget the Dutch. Don't forget the Germans, the
Yeah.
Belgians, Portuguese and Spaniard. They don't have as much,
Mhm.
but at some point they had a presence there.
Yeah.
For us, we still do.
Absolutely.
I
I mean,
mean,
slavery
yeah.
came out of Africa, and
Yeah.
quite rightfully, I think a lot of people whose ancestors did come over
Yeah.
are rightfully very angry about it.
Yeah. It's just in the case of France, because France got used to that, for example, that ability to have access to that uranium to run its nuclear power
Nuclear
plant.
power
Because
plants,
remember, France is considered the top in the world
Yeah.
when it comes down to nuclear technology as far as nuclear
Right.
power plants. That's where most of their electricity is generated from.
Mhm.
So for every light bulb in
Yeah.
France, you have to thank Niger for that.
Right. Well,
That's
and
the
that's
way I
the
see
thing,
it.
right? France is small. It doesn't have a lot of resources.
No.
It has lovely wine. And I have many very close friends in France, and I love going to visit them. But they're not resource rich.
Yeah.
And so to get all the resources, it's exactly what you're talking about. Where does it come from?
Yeah.
It comes from the person making, $1 a day in a mine, which is a horrible working condition overall, to make sure that France has whatever it needs at a very
Yeah.
cheap price.
And this is why I think, if I'm to think strategically as to why Macron will really move forward with the statement like this by
Mhm.
refusing, it has to do with wooing the Europeans into, hey, you guys
Yeah.
need to get in. Because remember, when you think about the European Union, who do you
Mhm.
think about? Two countries mainly, France and
France
Germany. That's
yeah.
it. So let me say thank you to, by the way, to a Black Raven. Thank you so much for your super sticker. I haven't seen Black Raven for a long
Mhm.
time.
Oh,
I
really?
remember, yes.
Well, it's nice to see you again,
nice
Black
to see
Raven.
you, man. Thank you so much for your
Hey, look
super
who's
sticker.
here.
Who?
Boone.
I had to let me move that one.
Hey,
Hey,
Boone, I was just talking about you and
just-
wondering where you
I
were.
just mentioned you. I hope all is well. And by the way, thank you for your comments on the Discord I read all that stuff.
Yes.
So.
And thank you to Hong Luong. I see you a lot in the comments.
Oh,
So
yeah.
thank you
Hang
very
Long
much.
has always been and contributing a lot of comments.
Mhm.
And thank you so much, Hang Long, for the insights of the comments.
Yeah.
I wish all our members in the community really read these comments. I mean,
Yeah.
they're very insightful.
Yeah.
I learn from them. That's
I-
the reason why I read them.
Yeah. I think and I may be a little biased, but I think we actually have the smartest and most insightful
Well,
audience
they are. I feel comfortable
of
saying
pretty
that,
much
so
everybody.
They can read between the lines.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying it to be Mr. Nice.
Absolutely.
That is not me.
Guys, we'll be on Rumble tomorrow.
Yeah.
We are going on Rumble live every single week. And the reason is because we got tired of not being able to say fully what we want. We appreciate and love our YouTube audience and our YouTube channel. But man, sometimes
we're gonna have to,
we just want
we're
to.
gonna start moving some of our conversations into the Rumble. So
Yep.
we'll be in due time. Most likely we'll have everybody over to Rumble because we can talk openly there. Literally, I mean, for what just happened to me, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
At the same time, I am not.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it really sad to see what has become of us to say we exist in a free society where you can respectfully criticize. This is not about degrading somebody or no that's what use of it come out of it. But when you just criticize for the sake of constructive criticism to learn from, I welcome when people say, Dr. O, I disagree with you on this. I really welcome that because I am going to learn something that I didn't see. So they didn't mean to. They meant to open my eyes on something that I didn't see.
Right.
I'm just a human.
Right.
But when you have people start attacking your character, that's where it gets, it's petty. It's very,
it is.
very petty.
Well, it's petty, and somehow, and it's not just in this country, but globally, somehow we have the notion that everyone has to have the same information. Everyone has to believe the same. Everyone has to think the same. And that if you think differently than me, you're dangerous. And so we can't have these dangerous ideas. Well, how are we supposed to grow as a society if we don't have different ideas? There have been many times in my life where I believed something very strongly, and then in conversation with someone else, learned something I didn't know. But that piece of information changed my mind about that.
And this is where the government finds it convenience, because the more division that exists, the easier it is to control.
Absolutely. And if we're not paying attention to the people in charge, if we're fighting each other,
then they get to do.
Then they get to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So that's what we talk about on Rumble.
So, well, we look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. I hope you join us on Rumble, and we'll post the topics and all that stuff. So we'll do that tomorrow. Well, I hope you'll find this very informative as always. And remember geopolitics. And remember, I forgot, prepare yourself for a changing world order. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.